Welcome to Know Your Money, where we will explore our relationship with money and how the psychology of it impacts our financial decisions, as everyone thinks about money differently. In our podcast, we'll be presenting a variety of financial topics in an easy-to-understand way, which we hope will assist you with managing your money. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Know Your Money. Warren, Craig, how are you today?
I'm well, and you, Bronwyn. Craig, always a pleasure, never a chore.
Yes, thank you, Warren. Good to see you. Bronwyn, good to see you.
You guys
Look who's
too.
back in the studio a week later.
Look who's back.
Hello, guys.
Very
Happy
well,
to be
thanks,
back.
and you?
Good.
Good to see you. Yes, learning again.
Yeah, Jeanne from Allan Gray back with us. Offshore specialist at Allan Gray.
Absolutely. I think
Thank you.
the last episode was so good on the why and the when, and now it's just to give people a little bit of okay, so now you've told me why and when, but then how? What should I be investing in? And we thought maybe you did touch on it a little bit in the previous one, but maybe a bit more of an explanation.
100%. So, let's start. Like I mentioned the last time, that there's such a thing as investing indirectly offshore. So you've got offshore exposure through a lot of the balance funds that you have access to in South Africa.
Well, in our model portfolio, there is
100%.
a lot of, they do have offshore exposure.
So my retirement annuity will have offshore, is that right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Great.
Because those funds can invest up to 45% offshore, right?
Okay,
and that's
with you.
managed by an offshore partner within the fund. But again, your money's based in rands, so it's almost, that's why I call it indirect exposure. Although you invested in offshore assets, it's still based in rands, okay? So when you withdraw, it comes back in rands. So that's your first and simplest way to get offshore exposure. The next, if you want to take it a step further, okay, so if you want full exposure to offshore assets, okay, through what we call a feeder fund or an asset swap fund, your exposure, you're feeding or you're investing into let's say an Orbis fund, but it's a feeder fund. So although you invested in the Orbis fund, it's still based in rands. Again, you're using the company's offshore allowance, not your own offshore allowance, but you're 100% exposed to the Orbis, let's say Orbis Global Equity Feeder Fund.
So it's earning dollars, pounds, whatever, yen
In the fund,
but when you
withdraw, you
Comes
withdraw in
back
rands.
rands.
Exactly.
Okay,
When you
with you.
contribute, you contribute in rands.
can't leave it there, it's got to come back.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's your feeder fund, and that you can access through a local platform, through all of your local products, like your retirement annuities, your discretionary investment products, as we do have available on our platform, your tax-free savings accounts as well. Then what I call direct offshore investing is if you want to take it that further step and you want to invest in hard currency, okay, you can invest on, let's say, for example, an offshore platform, okay. So Allan Gray has an offshore platform as an example, okay, where you can invest in euros, dollars, pounds, okay. You're using your own offshore allowance, so it's that R1,000,000 or the 10 million rand that you've got access to per calendar year. You're exchanging your rands into foreign currency, and you're investing in different foreign currency unit trusts that would be available through your model portfolios, as an example. There you're in hard currency, so when you add money in hard currency. When you withdraw in hard currency. So that's what I would call direct offshore exposure.
So how do I do that? Now I've got to go to the bank and say to the bank manager, listen, I've got to change this money into pounds or dollars. Is that what happens, or how do you?
Good question. So you've got various options available to you there, right?
Like Encompass, one of the ones we
Yes.
spoke about previously,
Yes.
or episode or
Yes.
3 or 5 ago.
100%.
Yes.
So you've got different options, right? If you want to go to your own bank and you do the Forex through your own bank, so you tell your bank, I want to exchange my rands into dollars, they can do that for you, but the cost is usually much higher if you do it that route, right? Then you've got external foreign exchange providers like the likes of Encompass or Currency Partners, Currencies Direct. There's quite a few of them available out there, right? They can facilitate the conversion from your rands to foreign currency. They obviously charge a fee for that, but they assist with things like special clearances if you want to take money offshore over and above your R1,000,000 single discretionary allowance and your foreign investment allowance. They can also assist with South African Reserve Bank approvals for miners, as an example, to hold foreign assets. So their services extend beyond just exchanging your money into foreign currency.
And also just on that point, I think going to an advisor that has a relationship with those partners might also help, because you don't know where to go sometimes.
Correct.
So I think we are missing kind of the link that you can generally just go to your advisor, right?
100%.
I think people think go to the bank, but it's not going to really help you. And then all those other services that Encompass, etc., do, the SARS clearance, other documentation, they do it for you and it's worth it.
100%.
These other companies are created and come about because they will be able to do it. There'll be better services and cheaper than the bank.
Correct.
Yes.
So why would you go to the bank? Yeah.
Exactly.
But you can also do it directly with you guys, right?
So the third option is, so what Allan Gray has tried to do, we've tried to make it as cost effective and easy to invest offshore. So we've partnered with an authorized dealer. That's basically a bank that does all of our foreign exchange for us. But because we are Allan Gray, we bulk instructions, we actually get a good rate from them, right? So it's a better rate than you get by going to the bank directly. So what Allan Gray does is we'll take your rands, you'll deposit the rands into our rand bank account, and we can then facilitate the exchange to foreign currency using our authorized dealer, the bank that we use internally, and then invest that on our offshore platform.
I think it's a brilliant system because you just literally take the rands from your South African bank, put into the Allan Gray bank in rands, and then you guys do the rest and behind the scene. I think it's an amazing...
Exactly.
And how do you know, like, their million rand or their 10 million rand? Do you know that at all, or?
So with regards to that rand lump sum facility, so I always say there's pros and cons, right? So it's a very quick and cost-effective way to invest offshore, okay? But Allan Gray doesn't facilitate any tax clearances, right? So if you want to invest more than your single discretionary allowance per year, you actually have to get that tax clearance, give us proof of the tax clearance before we facilitate.
And that's over $1 million. If you go over $1 million, you need a tax clearance.
Exactly. And like I said, Encompass, Currency Partners, or even on your e-filing, you can get a tax clearance for any amount over a term. Your tax affairs just need to be in order, obviously, and it requires a bit more admin from your side, whereas you can kind of give that over to your advisor and the foreign exchange company, which I would highly recommend because they do ask for a lot of information. So Allan Gray will just literally facilitate the forex. We don't get involved in terms of that any tax clearances, or South African Reserve Bank approvals. And if you are investing within that R1 million per calendar year, right, you don't need tax clearance for, but you will sign a disclosure when you invest less than R1 million or R1 million to say that you haven't spent any of your what we call your travel allowance, your foreign investment allowance. Just remember that every time you shop online, every time you go on holiday, you eat into that single discretionary allowance. Okay, so that's why we want to make you aware when you invest in rands that you're aware of the allowances that you have.
That I didn't know.
Yeah.
So if you have a South African credit card and you are on holiday and you're spending hotels, the amount you spent is part of your R1 million.
Correct.
100%.
Yeah.
And buying on Amazon or anything like that is
part
also...
of it.
Until it gets here. Which is not long.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So we try and make it as easy as possible.
But does that, because I know you've launched recently, so when you talk about platforms, I look at Allan Gray as two different platforms. You've got the local platform, which facilitates the endowments, the tax-frees, the RAs, the living annuities. And then you've got the offshore platform that does the LISP, as we said, link service provider. You've got collection of unit trusts, and you've got the endowment.
Yes.
So you don't have tax-free, you don't have pension, you don't have any of those things. You've got two products on the offshore platform. Is that correct?
100%, yes. So now when you invest offshore with Allan Gray, you've got the option of the two products. Okay, we've had a discretionary platform running for many, many, many years, and then end of last year we launched our offshore endowment. So offshore endowments, as with local endowments, have significant tax benefits and estate planning benefits for clients, especially those clients that have got a tax rate higher than 30%.
And living in South Africa.
And living in South Africa because it's legislated by the Long-Term Insurance Act, and it's taxed to what we call the 5-fund approach, where it's taxed at a flat rate of 30%, which translates into an effective capital gains tax of 12% by the life company instead of being taxed in your own hands. So remember, a client in their own hands, you can have a tax rate up to 45%, which translates into a capital gains tax of 18%. So if you're investing in an offshore endowment, right, and your tax rate is higher than 30%, you're getting taxed less in the endowment.
And it's less admin because it's not...
So much less admin.
But John, do I still have to wait the 5 years in the offshore endowment for unlimited access?
So
you could restricted access in the normal endowment on the local platform.
So let's unpack that. So traditionally, or the general rule that governs endowments is that you have this 5-year restriction period. And the general rule says that within that restriction period, you are limited to one withdrawal. And that one withdrawal is limited to all of your contributions that you've made plus 5% annual compound growth. Okay. After the 5-year restriction period has come to an end, you've got unlimited withdrawals. Okay, that's the general rule. And our local endowment still follows that rule. The offshore endowment, however, yes, we have made some provisions for clients that need additional liquidity. So we've kind of structured our product in a way where you've almost got like a contract with 100 underlying policies running in the background, right? So multiple policies that we manage on your behalf. Okay, so you'll always only see one contract, but we've got these multiple policies running in the background, which means essentially that you've got more than one withdrawal within the 5-year restriction period. So just a little bit more liquidity than what you're used to in traditional endowments. Yes.
And no more expense for that?
No.
There's no policy fee or anything for each?
No additional fees.
When you say multiple policies, what do you mean? So if I was to have a single endowment policy in my name and it was a local one, that's where the 5-year restriction comes in, correct?
Yes.
And
so you would have multiple policies in your name, or?
It's an automatic thing, right?
Okay.
So when you come to Allan Gray and you want to use our offshore endowment,
No, the offshore, yeah.
we issue what we call a plan. That plan is automatically made up of 100 underlying policies.
So let's say there's R1 million.
Yes.
Each, what would that work out to? Like
1,000 each.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've actually got 100,000 Rand policies. So if you want to draw out a certain amount, you'll only be drawing out on like 20 of those policies. So you've used your one free withdrawal on the 20 of those policies. If you want to withdraw another amount, you
Why
can
don't we
use
just do that
20 other
locally?
ones.
Because you're only legally allowed one.
No.
you can.
So I think the offshore endowments are a little bit more advanced than the local products. It's just the way that most service providers out there have started structuring their offshore endowments, because they know, like with offshore investments, maybe you need a little bit more liquidity than you do with your local endowments, right? So exactly to your point, where so.
Sorry, my maths was wrong there. It was 10,000.
Yeah, I wasn't going to correct
I
you.
realized.
So,
Thank you.
but to Bronwyn's point, so a typical example, let's make it simpler, right? Okay, so you contribute $100,000 into the offshore endowment. Okay, that $100,000 is split automatically amongst the 100 policies, which means it's got $1,000 per policy.
That's
there
right.
We go.
That's right.
There we go. Then you withdraw $20,000. Okay, we will fund that $20,000 withdrawal with 20 of those underlying policies. Okay, so those 20 policies will become inactive until the 5-year restriction period comes to an end, but you've still got 80 policies to withdraw from.
I understand, yeah.
And then after the 5 years, you combine it into just one seamless.
Then you can withdraw, and you've got unlimited access.
You
to
still
all
see
of
the
those
one
policies.
policy number.
You always only see one, so just know you never have to manage that. So Allan Gray will manage that on your behalf. You'll always only see one plan, and we'll kind of indicate how much liquidity you have at any point in time.
That's a great feature.
No, that is good.
Great feature.
Yeah, just a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
Which I think is useful.
So you say estate planning. I understand that to mean that should the person pass away, there's a nominated beneficiary.
Yes, 100%.
So that endowment will be paid immediately to the beneficiary, doesn't have to wait for your will to wind up. Whereas on the discretionary platform that forms part of your will, does the South African will cater for the offshore platform, the LISP?
Oh, you've got such good questions there, and I'll unpack both of those things. So, you okay?
Sorry.
No worries.
Like having a heart. Sorry.
You want some water? Right. So let's talk about the two options and the estate planning around the two options. Okay. So you've got the Allan Gray offshore LISP platform, your discretionary investment. So there you are the owner of the investment. Okay. So when you pass away, we will act according to instructions from your executor, and that can be a local executor according to your local will. Okay. So we will never need an offshore will for those assets to be transferred to a beneficiary nominated as per your will. Okay.
Right.
You don't need to see your will. We'll take instructions from your executor. Okay. And if the executor tells us you can transfer those assets to someone appointed in your will, we can transfer those assets, and those assets don't have to come back to South Africa.
Okay.
They can remain offshore.
Okay.
As long as the executor gives us an instruction to transfer those
And I
assets.
suppose that's where financial planner plays a big role as well, of what to bring
100%.
back, what not to bring back.
Heck, exactly. But it's still wound up in your estate.
Yes.
Okay. So your beneficiaries nominated and you will still have to wait for your estate to be wound up before they have access to those benefits.
Pay the executor's fees.
Executor gets involved, so you pay executive fees. Okay. So although the assets can remain offshore, it's a little bit more admin intensive and it takes a while to transfer those assets. With an offshore endowment, there's an automatic beneficiary nomination. So when you start the plan, you as the plan holder will nominate beneficiaries to take ownership of that policy should you pass away. So when you do pass away, it's immediately transferable to those nominated beneficiaries.
So it's not necessarily to pay out.
So it can pay out depending on how you structure the endowment. Okay. So it can either pay out or transfer ownership. Okay. It depends on your beneficiary nominations. Okay. But it's immediate. It's not wound up in the estate. You don't have to wait for the executor to wind up the estate. The executor actually doesn't deal with the assets, so there's no executive fees. Okay. So you save on executive fees as well. And you don't have to wait for the benefit to be paid to your beneficiaries. So it's seamlessly transferred. I mean, that for me is a great benefit to have within an offshore product, especially, yes.
Good argument to have one, yeah.
So, Joanna, you're very passionate about this endowment. It took a while to launch, but it's
taken
launched.
Quite some time, yes, yeah.
Okay.
But here we are.
And the other features in the endowment that you think versus the LISP, what would you recommend? The tax is one of it.
Yes.
The nomination of beneficiaries is the other one.
Mm-hmm. Liquidity we have
The ability
provided
to
for that
withdraw,
in the
yeah.
endowment.
That's
Although
amazing.
the flexible unit trust investment, you can add as much as you want, you can withdraw as much as you want at any point in time, pay into a local or an offshore bank account. Exactly the same with the endowment. Okay. The only problem is obviously you're limited. Okay, you're not as flexible as the flexible unit trust, but we've provided some additional liquidity through the multiple withdrawals.
Yes.
You've got the 120% rule. I don't know if we want to go down that path in terms of how much you can.
Episode. That's quite a complicated one.
Lots of rules that come in endowments.
Yes.
So yes, they give us great tax benefits and great estate planning benefits, but they
do.
also have certain rules that we have to adhere to. We can also facilitate the foreign exchange through the endowment. On the discretionary platform, it's only for the first million. For the endowment, we will facilitate the foreign exchange, not just for the first million single discretionary allowance, but for the 10 million as well.
You will do that. The
Yes.
platform does that.
Allan Gray will do that. Just remember, we don't do any tax clearances. Okay. So the client will need to get their own tax clearance.
So if
provided
the tax
proof.
clearance says you may invest 5 million, that is sufficient. Then Allan Gray will do the conversion for the 5 million. You put the
100%.
rands in, you
Yes.
convert it into whatever. Oh, that's amazing.
Is that something Allan Gray would
That's
be
very good.
looking into doing? Is moving into doing the tax clearances as well?
Potentially, yes.
Because
that's-
that surely would be very attractive for people.
Potentially, yes.
But you also get wound up in their
Yes.
tax affairs. If their tax affairs aren't in, the client's tax affairs need to be in order,
Exactly.
and there's a lot of.
We could potentially have almost like Encompass and Currency Partners have become third-party providers.
Yeah.
We could potentially refer you to a provider that can
Right.
assist
Or
with
like
that.
Encompass, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in my mind, is it saying I live in Johannesburg and I've got my investments on the moon, and then I'm going to move one day to Peru, and I tell Allan Gray to move my offshore money, some of my offshore money, to my Peru bank account, or I'm going to be in Tokyo and they can move my money to the Tokyo bank, or I go to Sydney. So is that almost how the offshore, in my
100%.
mind, looks like? You're going to have this.
100%. We can withdraw into any bank account in your name,
Yes.
anywhere in the world. Okay. So with the offshore discretionary platform, we pay, if you're invested in a dollar fund or a pound fund or a euro fund, we actually pay in the currency that you're invested in. Okay. Whereas with the endowment, you can actually choose the currency that you want to be paid in. So if you want to be paid in rands here in South Africa, or if you're sitting in Peru, you want to be paid in whatever currency, we can facilitate that.
Now, what happens if a client leaves South Africa for, say, a 4 or 5 year contract somewhere, and they still want to continue saving, but they've got hard currency now? They're going to use their dollars. They live in America and they got their dollars. Can they invest in the platform still?
Yes, 100%. So we allow for, call it non-resident investors. So investors that aren't resident for tax purposes, or they abroad for a few months. They can
Yes.
invest on our endowment as well as our offshore discretionary platform. But whether from a tax perspective, it's better to be invested on the discretionary platform versus the endowment comes down to tax residency. If you're going to emigrate and you're going to be paying taxes in a different jurisdiction in your own capacity, I would always say the discretionary option is maybe a better option. Why? Because on the discretionary platform, you get taxed in your own right. Okay.
Yes.
We at Allan Gray, because we are administered in South Africa, will always issue tax certificates, right? So an IT3B or an IT3C, okay? But if you are now living in a different country and you're paying tax in that country, if you're invested on AGOS, you will be taxed in your own capacity in that country, okay? We'll still issue tax certificates, but whether you do something with that tax certificate is irrelevant, right? Because you're paying taxes somewhere else.
Yes.
You would adhere to that country's tax legislation. With the endowment, however, the taxpayer is the life company.
Yeah, you have to pay that tax. That tax is paid.
Us as Allan Gray Life, we have to pay the taxes to Allan Gray. To SARS,
SARS,
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry.
And then
Don't take the
you
taxes.
may still be taxed on top of that where
Exactly.
you're
If
living.
you're now sitting in let's say, the Netherlands,
Yeah.
you might get taxed on those proceeds
yeah,
again.
yeah.
So again, that's where it's like really important to talk to your advisor on
100%.
how you should be putting your money, especially if you're thinking of going overseas.
But Brian, it's very important that you could be living in Holland or in the USA or in Australia for a while or for a long time. You can still invest on this platform
You can.
because the concept is that even if I'm living in Australia, I still want an international investment.
Yes.
Wherever I'm living in America,
Yes.
the financial planners will talk to their clients and say, you can't have everything in the US. It's got to be international. You got to have Europe. You got to have Japan, etc. Same concept as here. Some of your money should be invested offshore wherever you are in the world, and we can facilitate that for our clients via your platform.
And again, it comes down to the client's circumstances, where they're paying tax, where they're living, what currency they want to
Yeah.
invest in, what currency they want to withdraw in.
Yeah, yeah.
That, for me, is where an advisor definitely has a
Needed.
very important role to play, because it can get quite complex, right?
No, definitely.
And you could have additional tax consequences, whereas you wouldn't have previously had those consequences should you have spoken to your financial advisor first.
Good, Warren?
I
Any
understand.
questions?
No, not this time.
Awesome
Thank you very
stuff.
much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Sure.
Have a good one.
So, no, thanks once again.
You're welcome.
Gents,
Cheers.
ladies, all the best. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, would like to subscribe, please visit our website www.growthfp.co.za. The information we have provided in this podcast is our personal opinion. For more detailed information, please discuss your financial situation with a financial planner.